Well, Scott Morrison this week, of course, went to Washington in a show-stopping stateside visit that quickly became dominated by two international issues: concerns over climate change and, as we've just discussed, China's conduct. Once again saw Scott Morrison defending both his record and his rhetoric. This is The Week in Politics.
All the pomp, pageantry and power of the White House. Kicking off the first official state visit by an Australian Prime Minister since John Howard back in 2006.
As General Monash later wrote, the Americans were ever after received by the Australians as blood brothers.
As I just said to the President, thanks, mate.
But the organisation and structure soon gave way to this. As President Trump announced the toughest sanctions on Iran to date and the chance of considered conflict.
1 minute, I could do it right here in front of you, and that would be it. And then you'd have a nice big story to report.
The Prime Minister more measured.
We both would like to see a prosperous Iran.
Before long, the much-anticipated state dinner, a celebration of shared success and a toast between two leaders.
May God bless America.
This US trip has been a domestic roadshow for Mr Morrison, a factory tour in Ohio.
Together, we're making jobs great again.
As well as a $150 million investment as Australia partners with NASA for missions to the Moon and Mars. But it's issues facing our world that have dominated the week, as the Prime Minister made a push for a global reclassification of China as a newly developed country.
The world's global institutions must adjust their settings for China in recognition of this new status.
Does he think that will be well received and will reduce tension between China and the United States over trade?
A visiting Chinese Communist Party official offering this ominous warning to Australia.
If there's a war between the United States and China, you're the frontier. You first should sacrifice for that.
The Prime Minister, meanwhile, refusing to sacrifice any more Australian money to the UN's Green Climate Fund, telling the General Assembly Australia is curbing emissions.
Australia is doing our bit on climate change, and we reject any suggestion to the contrary.
Offering no new commitments to cut carbon emissions, in contrast with leaders who attended the UN's climate summit.
The fact is that Australians' emissions have been rising since 2014.
The Prime Minister now back in Australia dealing with the drought, a disaster many are calling a climate change consequence. David Shiraz, Sky News, Canberra.